reading this morning will be from Matthew 14, 13 through 21. Matthew 14, 13 through 21. When Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them, and healed their sick. When it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is already late. Send the multitudes away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves food." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish." He said, "Bring them here to me." Then he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass, and he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to the heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. Now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children.
Good to see each and every one of you here this morning as we come together. As you'll notice, the stage is a little bit more to it. Still see the bare bones to that. We're building, we're improving. And last week we talked about not just improving dealing with wood and shovels and hammers and drills, which we would like to gravitate towards. We talked about looking in the mirror and how to improve or how to get along with others. As Zach read for us a very familiar passage, I can't help but think when I look at a basket, being reminded of the baskets that were full there as he fed the multitude. Before we look at that though, we had a problem with leaking in our house on Old Charlotte Pike. And the leak was because of the washing machine. And the washing machine and the hookup there, the line was fine with the water line going in, hot water, cold water. But the problem was when the water would empty out of the washing machine, that it would spill onto the garage floor. We found out that where the hookup was to the pipe, it was an old metal pipe. And it corroded and just filled and clogged up, and every time the washing machine would empty out the water, it would just overflow the outlet there and come onto the garage floor. I thought, instead of going and trying to redo all of that and take out the metal piping and the PVC and all that stuff, I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull a MacGyver, if you will. I'm going to take some PVC pipe, take some duct tape, and a coat hanger. And so what I did was I put together this PVC pipe and I hooked with the coat hanger up into the wall metal pipe that hose from the wash machine where the water would drain out. And I had it all figured out, and it went along the baseline of the garage and it exited out beside the garage door. So I had to test it, right? Make sure no water was in the garage. And so I did. I turned on, I filled that wash machine full of water, and then I rinsed it, emptied out the water. And sure enough, that water was emptying out that tub, and there was no water, and everything looked great. I thought, yes, I'm finally able to do something. Well, I had my wife outside the garage just to make sure everything was fine. Before I knew it, I heard, "Josh!" "What? What is it, honey?" "There's water all over the driveway and in the backyard." I forgot about thinking about the water's leaving the garage, but where is it going? It's going outside the garage, and I had created another problem. Maybe you can relate to that. You can relate to trying to fix a problem. And when you do, you think, I've got this problem fixed, but all that you've done is you created something else. That illustration reminds me sometimes of big problems. I mean, really big problems. I think of problems like cancer, death. I think of poverty, homelessness, addictions. These are big problems, and I think to myself, Lord, I know we got to do good and all these things, but they're just so big. Just whatever little I do doesn't seem to help at all. And how can I fix it? We have that mentality in our minds. If there's a problem, I'll fix it. You have a concern, I'll fix it. I'll try to fix it. In my first year in ministry and preaching, that was a hard thing. I'm going to help these people. I'm going to try to fix their situation. And I realized I can't. And so we have this mentality sometimes, this attitude that if I can't fix it, then what's the use of me doing anything about it? If I can't solve the issue, like poverty, if I can't solve homelessness, if I can't solve the addiction crisis that we face in this world, what good is it me to do anything about it? We can have that attitude very easily. But I want to ask you something. Where does that attitude come from? That if you can't fix it, don't do anything about it. If you can't fix it, then what good can you do? Because when I read my Bible, I find that it's interesting that Jesus really didn't possess this attitude. This attitude of, you know what, if I can't solve something and end it for good, then I'm not going to do anything of good about it. And what I find interesting is, in this great story of feeding the multitude, which is mentioned in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, pretty significant, just like the resurrection. But in this, we find that Jesus meets a specific need. But when Jesus fed the multitude, let me ask you something. Would they ever, after that event, get hungry again? Have you ever been stuffed? I mean, so full that you couldn't think about food? But what happened? You got hungry again. And you ate again. Jesus meets a specific need in helping them. And yet we understand and know that when it comes to our spiritual need, Jesus met that need for good once and for all. There's no need for him to come and die, as was reflected in the Lord's Supper and what he did for us. But when it came to physical needs, he didn't solve every problem. There's still sickness, as there was sickness when he came into this world. There's still people that are hungry. Even Mark says in his account, Jesus saying, the poor you have always. Very true. If you wish, you could do them good. But with me, you will not always have. Here in this particular text, I want us to understand that if we can't fix something, it doesn't mean that we can't do good. And there are some times, maybe many times I should say, where it's not about us solving something. It's really about serving. How can I really meet the needs of others by helping them out? How to help those who are in need. So as we had the imagery of the mirror last week, thinking about looking at ourselves, before you look at a speck in your brother's eye, consider the plank in your own eye. I want us to think about the basket. I want you to think about the idea of serving. Forget about solving. We're not going to solve homelessness. We're not going to solve cancer in the sense on ourselves. We're not going to solve these things. But we can serve. We can meet needs physically. And more importantly, spiritually through Jesus. Number one is this. The first point I want to share with you is this, is we need to identify the need. It's interesting, as you read the account in Mark chapter 14, that there are legitimate needs here that are presented here. One is being he healed the sick. Sickness is a legitimate need, isn't it? If you don't think so, then don't bother reading our bulletin, because you'll find an insert full of people that are asking for prayers. Sickness is a legitimate need. And there's a lot of people that are dealing with that. And Jesus was there when the multitude came. He didn't just feed them, he healed the sick. many that had sick. But also we find legitimate need of hunger, getting hungry, isolated, away from home, and unable to have anything to eat. And there he meets a need as well. But Jesus also, let's consider the context here. He too had a need, and this need was to be deserted and to be left alone for a little bit. If you recall, when he had heard it, he left and departed to a deserted place. What did he hear? He heard about John, and John being beheaded by Herod, John in prison and beheaded. And that led him to be in isolate and deserted. And sometimes in Jesus' ministry where he had to get away and to be in communion with the Father in prayer and being by himself. And we can relate to that sometimes, can we not? Where we're just so stressed out with so many things that we just need some alone time. We just need to not talk to people and not be around anybody. Just really be with God and have that time. When the multitude came, as he had spent some time by himself, Jesus could have done anything, right? He could have said anything, and he would have been right about that because he is God, right? But what did Matthew say in his account? When he saw the great multitude, he was moved with compassion. Man, it's powerful. When you think about the idea of how he looked at them. Sometimes when opportunities arise where we can meet a specific need, it doesn't always happen at a convenient time. We don't get sick at a convenient time. We don't deal with things that are happening at a convenient time. As Jesus was presented this, Luke's account says that he received them. In other words, he welcomed them. But here in Matthew, he talks about having compassion for them. And to me, I believe the key to this is being compassionate. How he saw them with compassion really set the tone of his attitude as well as his actions. And if I'm lacking compassion, then that's really going to set the tone in my life, and especially when things happen unexpectedly in my life. And so I want you to think about it. As Jesus was presented with this great multitude of coming to him and really needing him, he could have said, hey, time out. I'm by myself here for a reason, and I really want to spend some time. I'm with you a lot, and I'll be with you. Just give me my space. Could have said, I just really need to rest. Really need to rest. Let me rest some. And I'll come and I'll help you out and I'll do what needs to be done. He didn't do those things. He didn't say those things. In that moment, he was able to identify and to help them out in the sense that by having compassion for them, he didn't take the disciples' approach to sending them away. He welcomed them. He received them. He did it because of compassion. How do I identify with those that are in need? How do I identify with those that need help? Simple. It's one word. It's compassion. Compassion. Compassion, not because and welcome and receiving, not because how life has treated us, and therefore we want to treat people because life's been good to us, we want to be good to them, but it's because of Christ and the example that he set. I love partnering with nonprofit groups and working along these people that have passion and compassion for what they do. They're not doing it for money, that's for sure. They're doing it to meet a specific need. And I love being around them because they're so full of service and meeting a need. And they're not there trying to solve problems. They're there just to serve. If you're filthy, if you smell, hey, here's a shower. If you're hungry, here's something to eat. If you're thirsty, here's something to drink. If you're lost, here's Jesus. Meeting a specific need, but doing so with compassion. Let me tell you something, folks. We as a church are the hands and feet of Jesus. We should, of all the groups of people, we should be the most compassionate group. Because we are ambassadors of Christ. We should show compassion when all else may not show compassion towards us. As Jesus demonstrates here in Matthew chapter 14. If we ignore those pressing needs that are around us, my friends, it's unsettling, and it's settling for less than what God has intended for us to become. The second greatest commandment is what? Love your neighbor as yourself. Let me ask you something. Who's your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? What about what John says in 1 John 3, verse 17? If I have these world's goods and my brother is in need, and I shut my heart against him. That's what it says. In other words, I have no compassion. But how does the love of God abide in me? To identify those that need help, as Jesus identified the people, we must have. The second thing I want to share is this. That is, we need to prevent making excuses. It's really what it comes down to, making excuses. Jesus was aware of the needs of the crowd. And he really, in John 6, verse 6, in John's account, he already knew what he was going to do, but he wanted to test them in this moment. And so he asked Philip. I don't know why he chose Philip. He just picked Philip out. Where are we going to buy the bread? Philip's response is quite frankly, our response to a lot of things. It's a money issue. We think about money sometimes. We think about, how much resources I have and what little I can do, and therefore, if I can't feed everyone, why should I feed one person? Well, we have about 200 denarii worth of bread, but that's not sufficient. We don't have enough money to take care of all those who are hungry. We can't possibly, money-wise. What Philip did is what we commonly can do. We could work the numbers. We could do the math, and our calculation is it's just not enough. There's not enough money. We don't have the money. It's not budgeted in our church. When we focus so much on that, we rely on our own resources. It's funny, Philip said that, but he said that in the presence of whom? Who has it all? Jesus. Jesus was right there. Now listen to me, don't misunderstand me. We have to count the cost before we build something. We have to be good stewards. But on the other end, we better not be so stuck in analyzing something to where we don't do anything about it. That's the other extreme to that. We need to have a good balance. Yes, we have to be good stewards. But yes, we also have to do something about whatever the need may be, and not just sit there and calculate and talk about it and committee it and all that, where we don't do nothing. In Matthew's account, notice the second. It's evening time. Let's just send them away. Notice, if you look in Matthew's account very quickly, when they heard it as well, this crowd on foot left their cities, plural. And their response is, let's send them to the villages. Cities to villages. Can you imagine the chaos of that? Of a crowd this size, they're in an isolated area. They go to the nearest, descend upon the nearest villages as they're from cities. And how distressed it would be. Send them away. Let them deal with it. Not our responsibility. That's kind of what I take from that. You know, we can't, there's no way we can deal with this, and really, it's not really our problem. Whether they get food or not, whether they're hungry. They have money. Let them use their resources. Let them provide for their own. Well, we can take that approach. Man, that's not my problem. Why should I help that person? That person made bad choices. That person went down wrong ways and got themselves in this situation. Why should I help that person? It's not my responsibility. Remember the Good Samaritan story, the parable? The traveler, beaten. The priest and Levi passed on the other side. It was that Samaritan. Was it his problem that he was beaten? No, it wasn't his problem. It just happened to pass by, but he did something about it, didn't he? He did what he could do. We need to think the same. We need to understand the importance of that we are not to excuse ourselves. And then there's nowhere in the Bible where it says we're justified in excusing ourselves of not serving or not doing good or not helping and meeting a need. Read Matthew 25. Go back and read Matthew 25 when Jesus describes the judgment scene. It all comes down to benevolent works. When I'm hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. It's meeting specific needs. Those that didn't do that, what happened to them? Well, they were on the left side, weren't they? They were departed from Jesus. We understand in that passage just how important and necessary it is for us not so much to solve. You can't solve everything, so don't go into it thinking you can solve everything. But you can serve. You can do something. And something is better than nothing, isn't it? So we need to identify those that are around us, those that are in need. We do so with compassion, with the lens of compassion. It may come when we don't have the time to do it. We do so with compassion. We need to prevent those excuses. That's not my problem. I don't have the resources to do that. Yes, we need resources to do something. But folks, let me tell you something. At the end of the day, faith-wise, it still requires faith, doesn't it? It's there in my Bible, and I bet it's in your Bible as well, that with all logistics, with all calculations, with all preparation, we still must live by faith. We still got to trust in Him. The last point for your consideration is this: helping people who have needs. I love what Jesus does. And I really apply this personally. Did He give them money? Did He take the 200 denarii and say, okay, what? I'm going to put this in a bag and I'm going to multiply this money and I'm going to send this money out? No. No, you're hungry. He gave them something to eat. You're sick. I'm going to heal your sickness. What Jesus demonstrates for us in this great act of meeting physical needs is literally meeting that need physically. Not providing money, not buying, giving, throwing money out to them and say, okay, you do what you need to do, but specifically doing something about it. Would these multitudes He helped ever have a need again? Yes, they would. Some of them, whatever sickness that Jesus healed of, they might have got something else. They would eventually die, wouldn't they? They wouldn't live forever. They would be hungry again. You might think, well, what's the point of feeding them in that moment if it didn't solve their issues? Again, can't stress this. Jesus demonstrates it's about serving, it's about doing something. We need to be people of compassion for one another and in the community. I can't think of a moment in our life where we don't need to be compassionate. Can you? There's no verse that exempts us. Well, because life has dealt you just some horrible things, because you have a terrible childhood, or because you made some very poor choices but you didn't know better, then you're excused from not being compassionate. It's not in the Bible. There's no card to get us out of that. Our compassion is really contingent upon one thing. That is our relationship with Christ. We show compassion. We are compassionate people, all because of Christ. Period. Let me ask you something. Do you want Christ to be compassionate to you? Do you want God to show compassion to you? Go back to Matthew 7, verse 12. As you want men do to you, do also to them. As we want God to do to us, we need to also do for others. I'll tell you something, folks. We may not do everything, but we can do something. Sin is rampant. We can't fix all the sinful things. Only Christ has the ability to do that. We can't. Cancer is huge. It touches most of our families. We can encourage. We can comfort. Sickness, we can help. Poverty and homelessness, we can do something. And there are a multitude of problems. In Mark's account, Jesus told the disciples, you need to go see, look what you have. And we'll use what we have. And we need to trust God when it comes to our own resources. We have monthly opportunities to do things. To help people that are in a life hospice with the snack. It doesn't solve their condition, but it does provide some sort of encouragement. We have homeless people that we help out. We do all of these wonderful opportunities. And guess what? They're monthly things. It is not like we do it this month and they're all fixed and we don't have to worry about it. It's not like for any preacher who preaches the gospel of Jesus Christ and no one responds, it doesn't mean there's not a spiritual need, does it? It doesn't mean stop preaching. We continue. We continue to serve. We continue to do what we can do for the name of Christ. Let me ask you something. The things that we do here as a church and as we do as individuals, does it do good? Yes. Does it please God? Yes, because as we have opportunity, let us do good to all. Yes, it pleases God. Can God use what we do, what little we do, for the good? He does it all the time. Disciples, they trusted the Lord even though they didn't understand. Here are 5 loaves and 2 fish, and before you know it, 12 baskets full of leftovers. Unbelievable. Just do what he says. It goes back to the mother of Jesus at the very first sign that Jesus performed at a wedding feast in Cana. Whatever he says to do, do. Do. In closing, when I think about how close it is for us to meet the needs of others, but yet we can be so far away, and the excuses that we make. We're reminded of the baskets and just the little that Jesus demonstrates and what we have with our resources. But take, for example, this cup, and on it I wrote what Jesus says, only a cup of cold water for those the least of mine, the disciples, will not lose your reward. Matthew 10, verse 42. Leo Bowles in his commentary said that a cup of cold water, only a cup of cold water signifies just a small act. Even a small act that is done in the kingdom of God does not go unnoticed with God. Well, it's only food. It's only a cup of cold water. It's only a bottle of water. It's only a cup of cold water. It's only a prayer. It's only a card. It's only a phone call. It's only a visit. It's just only a cup of cold water. Not lose your reward. It's about serving, folks. It's not so much about solving. It's not so much about trying to fix things and fix people. Much more better trying to fix a problem, home repair, than we are dealing with people. That doesn't mean we stay away from people, we don't get involved, and we don't do something about it, because we are the body of Christ. We are his hands and feet. And we are to serve. When opportunity arises, we serve. Will it fix it? Probably not. We keep serving. We keep doing it. In hopes to reach people to their greatest need, and that is their spiritual state. And the only one that can do that is not me and it's not you. Because we didn't die for the world. It's Jesus Christ. And in all these things, it's leading to the most important need. That's making sure we have a relationship where we need to with Jesus Christ. As Jesus demonstrates opening up the doors by being benevolent, making relationships, and therefore creating disciples. There's no reason why we can't do the same with God's help and with God's resources. Before we go and be a help to our neighbor, before we can go serve, we need to think about the second greatest command just for a moment in closing. Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor as yourself. You got to take care of yourself in a sense. It needs to be where it needs to be. You got to take care of the plank in your eye. Maybe you have a burden that's just too much to bear. Maybe there's sin in your life and you don't know what to do with it. You've come to the right place. It's the right time. It's the Lord's invitation to respond to it. Put on Christ through your confession, repentance, and baptism to maybe rededicate your life, maybe just for God to give you strength and wisdom and with such a load. And we're called to bear burdens by serving one another. We're here to help with compassion. As together we all stand and sing.